There are over 10,000 cities on Earth. Each one has a name. Each one has a reason it exists. Each one has a story most people have never heard. I'm gonna go to every single one. I'm David, and for each city I'll uncover how it got its name, why it exists, the places you have to go, and the restaurant you have to find. This is The Wild Escape. I want to ask you something. What if I told you there was a city right here in America that was supposed to be the New York of the West Coast? A city that had every single advantage, from a massive river, Pacific Ocean access, the best natural harbor for 1,000 miles. A city that, by every right, should become one of the great American metropolises. And what if I told you most people outside of Oregon have never even heard of it, besides a couple movies? Welcome to Astoria, Oregon. And by the end of this episode, you're going to be upset you haven't heard of this place sooner. So let's start at the beginning. To understand Astoria, you first have to understand why it exists at all. And that story, I promise you, starts somewhere that you'd never expect. So why does this city exist? To understand Astoria and why it exists, you have to go back to the early 1800s, and you have to talk about hats. Yes, hats. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm serious. In Europe, beaver fur hats were a must-have fashion item of the era, kind of like today's Rolexes. Every nobleman, every businessman, every person who wanted to look important needed a beaver hat. The problem? Europeans had hunted their own beavers to nearly extinction. They needed a new source, and fast. And in the Pacific Northwest of America, it was basically an untouched beaver paradise. Enter John Jacob Astor, a New York immigrant who already made a fortune in the New York fur trade, and had a vision so audacious it sounded made up. His plan was to load ships in New York with beads and blankets, sail them all the way to South America to the Pacific Northwest, trade those goods with Native American tribes for beaver pelts, and then sail the pelts across the Pacific to Canton, China, swap them for porcelain, tea, and then ship those to London for massive profit. A complete round-the-world trading loop, entirely run by one man's company. This is where it gets political, because Astor didn't just dream this up in a vacuum. He went directly to President Thomas Jefferson and pitched it to him personally. Jefferson loved the idea. Why? Because whoever controlled the mouth of the Columbia River controlled trade access to the entire Pacific Northwest. And in 1811, Britain and America were both racing to claim it. So in 1811, Astor's men arrived here, right at the mouth of the Columbia, and built Fort Astoria, the first permanent American settlement west of the Rockies. Think about that. This small town city in Oregon, population of 10,000, is where the United States first planted its flag on the Pacific side of the continent. But here's the twist. Just 2 years later, just 2 years, the men that Astor left in charge panicked. The War of 1812 had broken out. British warships were heading their way. They were cut off from New York with no resupply coming. So they did the only thing that they could think of. They sold the entire fort to a British-Canadian fur company for $58,000. Yeah, that's right, $58,000. Just to put that into perspective, adjusted for inflation, that's about $1.2 million today. America's entire foothold on the Pacific coast, the birthplace of westward expansion, sold for roughly what a starter home costs in Portland. Through a business transaction, not a battle. America temporarily lost its Pacific Northwest outpost. Astoria became British. It was eventually returned through America through diplomacy, not warfare. And a port city slowly grew up around the old fort, and they kept the name Astoria. And that right there is the whole reason this city exists. But it raises obvious questions. If the fort was named after Astor, and the city grew up around the fort, where does the name Astoria come from? Well, that's almost too easy. So how did Astoria get its name? Well, John Jacob Astor was the wealthiest man in America at that time. He was one of the first American multimillionaires. And when his company founded the fort here, he did exactly what any humble, understated businessman would do. He named it after himself. Fort Astoria, then just Astoria. The man literally put his own name on the city, and it's stuck here for over 200 years. I've seen people put a name on a sandwich and then act like they've conquered Rome. This guy claimed an entire city, so you kind of gotta respect him for it. All right, now that we know why the city exists, And where the name comes from, let's talk about what there is to actually do here. Because for a town of 10,000 people, I was not prepared for what it had to offer. Most small towns have one good attraction, maybe two if you're lucky. Astoria has over 5. Each one is completely different from the last. We're starting at the top, literally. The Astoria Column. The Astoria Column is built in 1926 and stretching 125 feet into the sky. The outside is covered in a spiral mural depicting 14 significant moments in Oregon's early history. Inside, 164 steps wind up to an observation deck at the top. One that I'm too scared to climb up, but I did. On a clear day, you could see Mount Hood, the Pacific Ocean, and the Columbia River all at once. It is generally one of the most underrated views in the entire Pacific Northwest. But here's my favorite part, and I didn't expect to love this as much as I did. You buy one of these little wooden gliders from the gift shop at the bottom. Walk up 164 steps and launch it from the top. Sounds ridiculous, but it feels incredible. Everyone around me, adults, kids, a guy in a full business suit, all of us launching little wooden planes off the monument like we're 8 years old again. It has become a loved local tradition, and honestly, it should be a national one. Now, from the top of this column on a clear day, you can actually see the next location we're about to visit. And it's one that puts everything we just talked about, Jefferson, Lewis and Clark, the race to the Pacific, into perspective in a way no history book ever could. Lewis and Clark National Historic Park. In 1804, President Jefferson, the same man who backed Astor's plan, sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on one of the most daring expeditions in American history to cross the entire continent, find a route to the Pacific, map what's out there. They made it. And in the winter of 1805, with the Pacific Ocean just a few miles away, they built a small fort and hunkered down for one of the most brutal winters of their lives. That fort was right here. What you're walking through today is a replica rebuilt in 2006 using Clark's own notebook sketches of the original floor plan. Historians are confident the original stood within yards of where this one stands now. It's small, it's cold, even in summer, and standing inside it, you'll suddenly understand what it was meant to be here in 1805. No resupply coming, no communication with the outside world, cold. Just a small group of people who crossed the entire continent trying to survive the Pacific Northwest winter before walking all the way back. This place just doesn't tell history, it makes you feel it. And when you're done feeling things, which it will make you feel things, head back toward the waterfront, because the next stop is about the river that made the city all possible, and what that river has taken from the people who tried to tame it. Columbia River Maritime Museum. Here's something most people forget. Without the Columbia River, there is no Astoria. There is no American West settlement, no fur trade, no Lewis and Clark route. The river is the whole reason everything happened here. The Columbia River Maritime Museum is genuinely one of the finest maritime museums in the country. And I say that knowing in a town of 10,000 people, the exhibits cover the river's exploration, the fishing industry, navigation, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the bar. The Columbia River Bar, the mouth of this river where it meets the Pacific Ocean, is considered one of the most dangerous river crossings in the world. Waves here can exceed over 40 feet in severe winter storms. It has claimed so many ships over the centuries that's earned its name, the Graveyard of the Pacific. The museum captures all of it, and you could actually board the lightship Columbia, a real floating lighthouse that was once anchored at the river's mouth for decades, guiding ships away from the waves in the dark. For a city of 10,000 people, this city punches way above its weight. Alright, 3 stops down, and I saved my favorite 2 for last. Because I need you to have taken all of this history seriously before I tell you what I'm about to tell you. The Goonies House and Oregon Film Museum. Okay, you now know Astoria is one of the oldest American settlements west of the Rockies. You've stood inside Lewis and Clark's fort. You learned about the river that has swallowed entire ships whole. You are becoming a serious, educated traveler. So is it in spirit that I inform you that the Goonies was filmed here? I know, but hear me out. Because this is actually more interesting than just a movie location. The Oregon Film Museum is housed inside the original Clatsop County Jail, the same jail from the opening sequence of the film. You can step right inside the actual jail cell that appears in the movie, check out memorabilia, and see exhibits from other Oregon film productions. But then you walk a few blocks to the house right here, privately owned. You can't go in, but people come from all over the world to stand here and look up at the Goonies House to feel like a kid again. And that honestly is very Astoria. This city has a remarkable ability to reach into your chest and grab something. Whether that's your sense of history, your sense of wonder, or apparently your inner child who just wants to find a treasure map. But hey, I'm not judging. I stood here for over 20 minutes in awe, reminiscing about a time I watched some movies with my siblings. But now, it's time to eat. But before we eat, there's one more stop. And this one takes us out of town, right on at the beach, and straight back into something we talked about earlier in this episode. Fort Stevens State Park and Pete Iredale Shipwreck. Remember in the Maritime Museum segment where I told you about the Columbia River Bar, the graveyard of the Pacific? Well, the mouth of this river has swallowed over 2,000 ships since 1792. This is one of them, the Peter Iredale, a 4-masted steel sailing ship that left Salina Cruz, Mexico in September of 1906, bound for Portland to pick up a load of wheat for England. On the night of October 25th, the captain spotted the Tillamook Rock lighthouse through the fog. He thought he was close. He thought he knew where he was. Well, he was wrong. A heavy northwest squall drove the ship hard into the class stop pit, right here at 3:45 in the morning. 3 of her masts snapped on impact. The crew of 27 plus 2 stowaways all survived. They simply walked ashore, and the captain abandoned the ship for the last time. He reportedly looked back at her and said, "May God bless you, and may your bones bleach on these sands." And they have, for over 115 years. This is one of the most accessible shipwrecks on the entire West Coast. You walk right up from the parking lot, cross the beach, and you're standing right next to it. At low tide, you can walk completely under it and around it. The bow and the mast are still here, rusted, salt-eaten, slowly disappearing into the sand year by year. The beach itself is Fort Stevens State Park, 4,300 acres of forest and history. The same park contains the remnants of Civil War era military fort that, in World War II, became the only military installation in the continental United States to be fired upon by a foreign enemy since the War of 1812, when a Japanese submarine surfaced off the coast and it shelled it. The only thing they managed to hit was a baseball diamond. This beach has stories in every direction you look. Give it the time it deserves, and now, for food. I've been walking this city all day, and everything we've seen has been soaked in history. So naturally, I'm gonna go somewhere built on the exact ground of where all that history came from. What if I told you there's a brewery in town built directly on top of the original Fort Astoria, the exact ground where this whole story started? The fur trade, Jefferson's plan, America's first foothold on the Pacific coast. Someone looked at that sacred patch of earth and said, why don't we just build a pizza oven there? I respect that enormously, so let's go. Fort George Brewery, and I cannot think of a more American thing than turning a birthplace of America into a place where you can get an incredible beer. The beer is some of the best in Oregon, and Oregon is serious about its beer. In colder months, head upstairs, grab a window seat, watch the ships move up the Columbia, and order a pizza. In the summer, they have a beer pier. Outdoor seating right on the waterfront where you could watch the sun go down over the river with a cold glass of beer in your hand. The history underneath your feet is free, and the pizza is worth every penny. Or in my case, the fish sandwich. So, what a way to end an episode. I'm full, got a nice little buzz, and it's time to move on to the next city. Here's what gets me about Astoria. This city, this 10,000 person city on the rainy Oregon coast, is where America's entire westward story begins. The fur trade, Lewis and Clark, the race to the Pacific, the fight over who owned the continent. It all leads right here to this river, to this town. And almost nobody knows the history about it. That's why I do this show, because every city on earth has a story just like this one, a reason it exists. A moment in history where everything could have gone differently, where one decision or one very bad business deal could have changed the course of the entire nation. There are over 10,000 cities out there waiting for me to tell their story. I've now done 2. For the next video, I'm gonna be heading south. Subscribe to find out where I end up next. Tune in next time on The Wild Escape.